In this video, I'm gonna show you my 5 favorite gimbal moves that you can use to level up your next video project. And to demo it, I'll be using the brand new Zhiyun Weebill 3S with the Canon RF 24-105. I'm also gonna walk you through some of the newer features of the Weebill 3S and compare it to the older Weebill 3 and this cute little guy, which is the Crane M3S, so that you can decide exactly which gimbal is right for you. This video was made possible by Zhiyun, who provided these gimbals so that you could be one of the first to hear about them. One of the mistakes that I see a lot of beginners make when they have a gimbal is that they just move really fast. I like to really go for those smooth and slow movements, because you have to think of the gimbal as a layer of your image stabilization. So the lens itself and the camera body have built-in image stabilization that will get rid of those like really micro jitters. And then you, as kind of like the large level of stabilization, can walk. You know, you kind of have to have that ninja walk as you're moving smooth, but then the gimbal will smooth out in between those really large movements and those really small movements. One of my favorite shots that you can start your videos off of, and it's kind of an essential staple of when you're trying to introduce a scene, is an establishing shot. So I've got the house in the background, I've got Will on the trail. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start with my gimbal pointed upwards, and then I'm gonna bring it down to reveal the scene. The biggest change to the Weebill 3S is that the base and handle is now a separate element. So if you remember from the previous version, you have that handle, but it's essentially built into the base. Well, that's now a separate component. Like before, the little tripod base that allows you to set your gimbal down, that can come off because it's screwed onto the bottom, but this guy is now a completely separate component. So if you don't want that handle and you don't want that base, you don't want that little armrest, now you can have a more compact gimbal setup that's a little bit easier to either store inside your camera bag, or usually what I do is I'll just clip it to the outside of my camera bag. The grip is also a little bit beefier. Now, I don't have massive hands, but I do find it more comfortable and a little bit more reassuring that there's a little bit more heftiness to that grip. The joystick nub is also a little bit wider and a little bit easier to maneuver. It is still on the left-hand side of the grip. So if you're someone who wants to use a gimbal left-handed, you might want to give it a try in person before deciding to go with the Weebill 3S. The function of the front button is the same as before. So if you double tap it, it will recenter the gimbal. And if you triple tap it, it will put it into selfie mode where it faces you. And on mine, I actually set up this front wheel to be electronic focus, but you can go into the menu and customize those buttons any way you want. One of the go-to gimbal moves that you can use pretty much for any type of video project is a slow push-in or a slow pull-out. Basically what you do, you just hold the gimbal forward and you walk straight, just like what Rich is doing with Will. Now, this is great if you're trying to emphasize something, like if you've already established a scene and you want to bring the viewer closer in, or if you want to end a scene, you can do a pull-out, and that kind of implies that something is ending. Again, this is one of those things that if you don't have any other gimbal moves, you can use it and it pretty much works well in every scenario. Any thoughts about slow push-ins? It's a pretty easy one, eh?
They're very cinematic.
Couldn't agree more. One feature that they've added to the Weebill 3 is vertical mounting. So the whole rail assembly comes off, and then it slides on in the vertical orientation so that you don't need a separate bracket or something to mount it vertically. You can basically do it with everything that comes with the gimbal. The top plate, or the main plate that the camera attaches to, is the same as the previous model, so those parts are actually interchangeable. And the front light is still there, and it's activated by holding in the wheel. And now you've got a light that's built into your gimbal. It's not the strongest light, but if you do need need it in a pinch, it's convenient to have. One thing they removed was that the previous Weebill 3 had a built-in microphone, so that no longer exists. One thing that's changed is the power button used to be on the base, but because the base is gone, it's now up by your thumb, and the USB port is also on the side of the grip. One thing that you no longer have on the Weebill 3, there was this built-in, is like a little magnetic screw that you could use to attach the tripod plate, and that used to go on there. Because of the new vertical feature, there's no longer a space for that. So if you want that little key, you just have to carry a separate tool in your pocket. If you want to expand upon the slow push in and pull out, you can do a follow shot. So that's where both you and the subject are moving. You can do it fast, you can do it slow, but because I want to maybe make this a little bit more exciting, I'm going to do it at a normal speed. We'll shoot at 60 and we can slow it down later. All right. So I'm shooting this a little bit wider. This is 35 millimeters right now. So if I keep a little bit more space between my subject, then I can show my subject in the environment. You know, I've got that leading line of the beach. And if I want, I can get a little bit closer. You know, get my subject to look left and right. You know, maybe go on a little bit of an off axis as he's walking. You know, just to give myself some variety when I'm editing this later. I would recommend using the Weebill 3 with regular size mirrorless cameras. If you have a larger mirrorless camera like the R3 or like Nikon Z9, you might have a little bit of trouble getting it to fit. But if you do have a smaller mirrorless camera, those will fit no problem. If you have something like a Sony 6400 or like a crop sensor mirrorless camera, that's when you could also get away with something like the M3S because it's notably smaller than the Weebill, but also it doesn't have as big a battery. So the Weebill 3 will have a bigger battery. Talk about that in a minute. But one thing both of these now have is Bluetooth. So if you want to connect to your camera and your camera supports it, you can actually activate the shutter with the button on, so the record button on the back of the gimbal. Now, my recommendation, if you're in a run and gun setup where you need to record instantly, I would still use the USB cable because there is a little bit of a delay from when you hit the record, if you're using Bluetooth, to when the camera actually starts recording. Now, because we have the armrest and the handle, what we can actually do is get the gimbal really low to the ground and do a low shot. So you can combine this with the follow shot or an orbital shot, but essentially what you can do is put the gimbal like that into a briefcase or an underslung mode, or because we have the extra handle attached, you can also hold it like that. So we're gonna try that and kind of get some closer detail shots of our subject. All right, I'm just gonna get you to walk and I'm gonna do a close-up of your feet. Let me just flip my screen out so I can actually see what it is that I'm doing. Go for it. So this is allowing us to get really close to the ground and get some smooth footage that would be really difficult to get if you were just doing it handheld. When I was doing my test shots with the Crane M3S, I was actually using smaller prime lenses just because the gimbal isn't gonna do well with larger, like 70 to 200 or 24 to 70 lenses. In that case, if you're gonna use big zoom lenses, you're gonna wanna go with the Weebill 3S. The benefit of using a smaller camera and a smaller lens means with the smaller gimbal, you can actually fit it right inside your camera bag. So in my case, my camera bag has a roll top, which just has all this extra space. I could literally just sit it inside, and then if I wanted to take it out to do a gimbal shot, it was pretty much ready to go. Another thing to consider, like most gimbals, is that the base plate that gets attached to your camera is a proprietary design. So whatever you do, do not lose these. So this shot that I'm doing right now, I like to call it a parallax shot, but technically it's a truck shot because I'm moving side to side and focusing off to my subject in the distance. To really sell this shot, it helps if you have a little bit more of a telephoto lens. So if I zoom in to 50 and try that one more time, or actually let's go all the way to 70, and I'm focused on the house, and I've got this grass in the foreground, and it really compresses the scene And you can use that as an establishing shot, or if there's details that you want to show, it's a great way to bring that depth of field and that compression into your images. The biggest lens that I would personally recommend using on the Weebill 3S would be something like the 24-70. Now the Canon 24-70 is a really heavy lens, so I actually opted to use the 24-105 because it is a little bit lighter and would give me better battery life. If you're gonna use a telephoto lens, I did try the 70-200. All the way zoomed into 200, you're gonna have problems balancing it because it is such a big lens. Now, one thing, the base plate on this does have screw holes on the bottom. So if you're looking to add counterweights, like that's one way to get around it. If you're using a heavier lens, you can either screw in counterweights or you could, Velcro something just to kind of balance it off a little bit better. The Weebill 3S has 11.5 hours of battery life. Now this test is done with the gimbal stationary. So the more you move around, the heavier the lens you attach. If you use the light, all those features will drain the battery faster. Now in practical use, we shot for an afternoon worth of video footage, and that's about as long as I was able to get before I needed to recharge. Now it does recharge in about 2 hours. That's the same with the Crane M3S. They both take about 2 hours to recharge. The M3S gets slightly less battery life at around 7.5 hours. And of course, if you're using something like the Bluetooth function, that will also affect the battery life. In my case, I was using the USB-C cable because I found that worked a little bit better with my camera. For the cost, you can check that out in the links down below. There are two options for each of these gimbals. You can get them standalone, or for $120 more, you can get a case. Now this is the case for the Weebill 3S. There's enough room for the gimbal, and then there's a separate compartment for the accessories. And with that combo kit, you'll also get the kind of like 2-part handle / armrest. My favorite gimbal shot is the orbital shot, but it's also the most difficult because it requires a little bit of practice. My preference is to do it in a location where you have a little bit of a background, because we're gonna be creating that same sort of parallax effect where the background is moving behind. And if we can reveal the background or showcase our subject in the background, then it really adds to the effect of this type of shot. Anything else about the orbital shot? You ever done an orbital shot?
Done it, yeah.
Rich has done an orbital shot. Let's go shoot the orbital shot. Follow me. We found the spot. Oh, hold on. We found the spot. Yes, this is perfect. The waterfall is loud, so I'm gonna try and tuck over it, but I'm gonna keep Rich stationary because he doesn't wanna get wet. So I'm gonna try and orbit around him. We'll see if I don't fall in the water. Another tip, when you're doing an orbital shot, don't look at your screen, look at your subject and make sure your gimbal stays smooth. If you look at your screen, it doesn't really help you because all it's doing is just doing the focusing for you. Anyways, I'll show you what I mean. Plus, I don't want to fall in the water. Let's try that again. If you're doing a shot with a subject and you're going around one way, you want your subject to look the other way. So you don't want to follow them because then you'll be chasing them. This is how not to do it. You'll see what I mean by I'm chasing my subject. 3, 2, action. See, we're just following each other. It's not giving the desired effect. So I'm gonna tell Rich, flip the other way. You do the same thing, but look down the river, okay? 3, 2, go. And I was maintaining my eyesight on my subject. That way you're not getting too confused by getting concentrated on your screen. Regardless of what type of video work you do, it is handy having a gimbal for those moments when you need super smooth shots. Now, you may have noticed in this video, I was shooting with some new lenses. And I actually did an unboxing of these separate, so look for that video coming up in the future. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead, let me know down in the comments below. What's your favorite gimbal move? Is there one that I missed that I should cover in an upcoming video? And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And if you do, I'll see you in the next one. My back is so tired.
That's why we need easy rig.
My problem is just existing. Existing is challenging.